Hey guys, it's Lexi, and in this video I'm going to be talking to you about how to pass the integrated dental board exam. I'm also going to be sharing some promo codes with you guys should you decide to purchase any of the BNB dental materials that I mentioned in the video. So the first thing to figure out is when you're going to actually take the integrated board exam, and this is usually taken where students previously took NBDE Part 1 and Part 2. Now that's gone away and we have the integrated exam instead, and so you would typically take integrated at the same time that students previously took NBDE Part 2. And so this will typically be at the end of D3, beginning of D4. It really just depends on your school. So you'll want to check with the administration at your school to see when they take that exam. And I do recommend for those of you who are planning to take the ADAT to try to take it at a similar time period to when you're going to take integrated, because there is some overlap, at least for the clinical sciences portion of the ADAT and the INBDE exam. And then also just remember that some specialty programs actually require that you've passed the exam before you can apply to the program. So if your school typically takes integrated at the start of your D4 year, but you're planning to apply to specialty programs before that, you might want to check to see if you can take the exam sooner so that you're not excluded from applying to those programs. In terms of how the integrated exam compares to the NBDE Part 1 and Part 2 exams, according to the Joint Commissions on National Dental Examinations, they essentially highlight how the integrated exam is going to be less about memorizing random facts and more about being able to apply your knowledge on the clinical sciences to different case scenarios, and also being able to integrate the basic sciences and the clinical sciences in order to answer what you would do in a particular patient scenario. And the general consensus from students who took both exams, so when they first came out with integrated, they were piloting the exam. So they had students take it who also took the Part 1 and Part 2 exams and had them compare those exams. And a lot of the feedback was that previously the exam had a lot of random facts, and to a certain extent the integrated exam is still going to have that, but there's going to be a lot more application-based questions. So it's really important that you have exposure to different case scenarios and you practice clinical decision-making given a particular case. In terms of how long to study for the integrated board exam, I would say that most students at my dental school studied for somewhere between 2 and 4 months, and it really just depends. You kind of know yourself. If you're generally someone who needs a little bit longer to study, then you'd probably want to go closer to 4 months. If you can kind of cram the information for most of your exams quickly, you should be okay with 2 months, but somewhere in that 2 to 4 month range is going to be good for most people. I don't recommend studying for any more than 6 months, or you'll probably have overstudied and you might also just be burnt out. And the only exception to this would be if you have some extenuating circumstance. So maybe you have kids and you have a very limited amount of time to study, or you're working a job while you're also in dental school, or some other situation where you just have a very limited amount of time to study each day. Then you may need to extend it for longer, but it would be very uncommon that someone would study any more than 6 months for this exam. So in terms of how I studied, I actually took NBDE Part 1 and Part 2, and so that's a little bit different than the integrated exam as I mentioned, but the materials that I used for NBDE Part 1, which was essentially the biomedical sciences for what would now be the integrated exam, I used BNB Dental, and then for NBDE Part 2, I used the Mental Dental YouTube videos. And if you want more information about how I studied for the ADAT exam, you can check out my other videos. So in terms of how to study for the exam, there's really a lot of options, and I wouldn't say that there's any one right way to study. Based on how I studied for NBDE Part 1 and 2, which I felt very prepared going into those exams, and even for how I studied for the ADAT, I would recommend some combination of BNB Dental and then the Mental Dental YouTube videos. So if you're not familiar with Mental Dental, it's a YouTube channel that provides free videos that can help you build a foundation of knowledge basically for the clinical sciences. And I found these videos to be very helpful when I was preparing for NBDE Part 2. However, if you're looking for a little bit more in terms of your preparation for the exam, or you want a more structured approach, BNB Dental offers INBDE materials that are going to be a lot more comprehensive and targeted toward this exam. They also offer pre-test videos, flashcards, even some case-based questions and practice tests that can help you to really learn and assess your knowledge. And I think this can can be important because I always emphasize to students the importance of active studying. And I think sometimes if all you have are videos, it's very easy to fall into a sort of passive studying. And that can make it a lot more challenging to determine if you're actually learning the information that you're studying. But when you have those practice questions through the flashcards and those case-based questions, it really allows you to apply the knowledge that you've learned. And that really is what the integrated exam is all about. And that's why I think that it may be worth it for some of you to invest in purchasing BNB Dental INBDE materials just to give you that extra practice. With that said, I totally get that as a dental student, a lot of the times our budget's pretty limited and don't really want to spend money on things if we don't have to. And so the question is really, is it worth it to pay money for the INBDE resources when you could be using just free videos on YouTube? And I think it really comes down to you personally, and it's a personal decision on how you study. So it partly depends on your initial confidence with the clinical sciences. So some people just feel pretty strong about it even before they start studying. And in that case, you might be fine just using YouTube videos, but there really are some benefits of paying for a subscription. And I would say primarily that's going to be access to practice questions to help gauge your progress and also make sure that you're not falling into that passive learning and really staying active in your approach to studying for the exam. Another thing is that sometimes it can make studying a little bit more engaging. So a lot of the times when you're just watching a video, it's easy to get distracted, pick up your phone. But if you have to actively think to answer questions, and then if you miss the question, you can figure out, okay, this is a gap in knowledge that I have. What is it that I need to learn in order to improve in this area? It can be very helpful. While I do think it's possible to pass the exam by using YouTube videos alone, I do think that for some students, it's just going to be very difficult to use that approach. It's very easy to say that, okay, I just watched all of these videos, I'm ready, when in fact, maybe you didn't actually learn the information as well as you think that you might have. And so by having practice questions, you can really test yourself and make sure that you're prepared before you take the exam. So with that said, for those of you who do decide that you would like to have those practice questions, flashcards, something to make sure that you can actually test yourself, I do have some promo codes to share for you guys if you're interested for BNB Dental INBDE materials. And so these are just different codes based on how long you would like to purchase. So I personally would recommend either doing the monthly or the Freedom. The nice thing about the Freedom one is that it is going to save you a little bit more money, and that's a set 4 months that you'd have access to the materials. I don't think, like I said before, that 12 months is really necessary for most of you guys. It's really just going to depend if you have some sort of crazy circumstances, maybe. But for the vast majority of students, I think what makes the most sense is going to be to do the 4-month plan. But for those of you who have a limited time, it is nice that they offer a monthly option as well, so that if you just want to use it for a month, let's say your exam's coming up, you still have that option. But you can use these codes for 10% off regardless of whichever plan you choose. I've listed the corresponding codes for each plan on the slide. And then finally, I just wanted to comment a little bit about the ADAT exam with regards to this INBDE material that's offered by BNB Dental. So can you really use that material for the ADAT? I think the answer is yes. So I did go through the material that BNB Dental offers for this exam. And while this material did not exist while I was studying for the ADAT, I think there is a significant overlap between this material and what is presented on Mental Dental. However, one thing to factor in is that I would still recommend getting the BNB Dental NBDE Part 1 material, because remember that the material that they offer for NBDE Part 1 that I mentioned in my ADAT study schedule video is going to be very helpful in terms of preparing for the biomedical sciences portion of the ADAT. Whereas if you do decide to purchase the INBDE material from BNB Dental, that can help you prepare for the clinical sciences portion of the ADAT. And the benefit of this is it's just additional practice questions as well compared to using Mental Dental. Yes, it would be an additional cost, but it is going to allow you to have some more practice. For some of you guys, it might be worth it. And if you're going to be using it anyway to prepare for the integrated exam, it'd also be nice to be able to use it for the ADAT for those of you who are studying for that exam. And I just wanted to close the video by wishing you guys the best of luck in your exam preparation. And just a reminder that you will eventually pass whatever exam you're preparing for. If it takes you an additional attempt, it can be a little bit disheartening, but just remember that you are capable of passing this exam. For those of you who are interested in using the B&B dental materials that I mentioned in the video, I do have the links in the description below for both the INBDE exam materials that you can use for the integrated board exam, as well as for the clinical sciences portion of the ADAT if you're interested. And then I also have the link to purchase the exam materials for the biomedical portion of the ADAT exam, and the promo codes are also listed below. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and also hit the notification bell so that you can stay up to date when I upload new videos.